The name of John Berenberg is one that many of you will associate with the interior design work aboard the liner QE2. He's now designing yachts of all sizes, both interior and exterior, for wealthy clients in all parts of the world. When Nigel Murphy met him at the boat show at Earl's Court, he wondered how he set about the whole problem of designing for small spaces, afloat or ashore, and he asked him what was the smallest commission he'd ever undertaken, or was he only interested in the juicy plums?
No, all jobs are juicy plums. I like working. I like problems. The smallest. I think the smallest thing would be a galley, which was in an area which occupied exactly 1 square yard. Now, if you actually want to fit everything in, you must measure each individual thing and put them together in different combinations, whether you do it by cutting out cardboard or newspaper or draw it on squared paper. And you finally find the best combination to use those objects and put them in the smallest space. Now, the next important thing is, which particularly applies to kitchens and cupboards, most people have far too much of everything that they never use. How many married couples after 10 years have still got 6 sets of crystal goblets which they've never used, except perhaps once at Christmas time when the in-laws came and a lot of other people? One's really got to discipline oneself and say, really, do we need 4 casseroles? One must, unfortunately, get rid of the ones you don't use, and you'll be amazed how much space you suddenly find.
Well, now, how do you apply this to designing a galley or indeed a main room aboard a small yacht?
We simply take the function of the room and the number of people who are going to use it and the way of life that's going to go on in that room, connected with cooking or eating or watching telly or sleeping or anything you like. And after doing that, we then plot a general picture. It's quite easy to imagine oneself getting up in the morning. We know the design of the yacht, what you do between getting up in the morning and going to bed at night, the physical needs that you have, whether it be swimming 3 times a day or 10 times a day, and the amount of towels you need for that, where they will store, how many pieces of soap, how many gallons of water, all of these kind of things. When you start juggling them around, you suddenly find you have an equation, which is an answer, really.
Well, there are something like 750 examples of various ways of resolving that problem right round us in the show now.
Great many poor examples, I'd say. A lot of examples which could do with a lot more thinking. There's some very good examples, too, but by and large, I think that the examples represent, shall I say, slightly misguided thinking. I think we spoke before about this question of volume, that because one's working with restricted volume, it's a very big mistake to imagine that people suddenly lose 30% of their volume when they walk into a restricted space. So it's absurd having beds 5 foot 7.5 long, or seats 1 foot 3 wide, or loos too small, or indeed cupboards too small in which you can't hang clothes. In fact, you can't do anything with them. They're a total waste of space. So it's much more important to have less things.
Well, how do you overcome that problem? I mean, you talk about a small bed for a start. If you can't put a quart into a pint pot, and if you've only got a small yacht, what do you do about it?
The skill of good design is putting a quart into a pint pot and then appearing to still have a pint left over. And this can only be done, I think, by using large, simple solutions to very complex, small areas. I'm quite sure about that, and I base my whole philosophy on it. I think that the problem often lies in the fact that people do not relate the reality of the situation in saying, let's say they have an 18-foot boat and they try and cram 4 berths into it so they can say we've got 4 people to sleep in it. If I took the local health inspector onto many 19-foot expensive yachts, they would condemn it straight away, because people would be living under conditions that would never be tolerated. There would be an outcry in the newspaper, slum conditions, ghetto conditions. I wouldn't dream of putting people in these boats. I'd find a better solution in as much as find cheaper methods of producing bigger and more comfortable boats that could be handled by 1 or 2 people, or 3 people, but look into the situation of making bigger boats cheaper, where you could put more people into them.
Any particular tricks you have now adopted for giving a much greater feeling of space, say, in the main room in a yacht?
There's certain basic rules that corners, cupboards, or any kind of fitment round an L is an enormous waste of space. You immediately lose the square of the L. in the corner, which even if you use it with top access means you've got to move something off the top to get at the trapdoor to get underneath. So I think in almost all situations it's always better to have one wall fully cupboarded than trying to put the cupboards around the corner of an L. The other thing to do, I think, which is also important, is to look at the levels very closely. If a room has an enormous number of changes in levels of high cupboards, low cupboards, medium cupboards, the effect will be very disturbing and very difficult. And that, again, relates to portholes or windows in boats. You often find within one area 3 or 4 different shapes of windows, which is very disconcerting.
And you would advocate, for example, such things as full-size beds, ones that would fold up into the wall, presumably, this type of thing?
Preferably not fold into the wall, because I think it's a nuisance folding them into the wall. I'd much rather have beds which were designed in a way that in the daytime you could use them as sofas or seats without feeling you're sitting on a bed and wrecking the bedspread. I mean, you would prefer, I assume, not to fold a bed into a wall. It's such a bore if you come down below and you're cold and you're tired and you have to undo the bed and do the blankets up and the whole thing. One's just got to look at it very subjectively and say to yourself, would I like to do that, and therefore would I inflict it on one of my clients?
So do